Hi everyone, I just want to quickly show what the pathway in IT is, and this diagram here is not meant to be exhaustive because IT is such a fast-moving area that you probably need to update this every second because there's probably something new coming up because everyone in IT is trying to come up with the next big thing, trying to do things better, but I think this is a good enough start for those who want to get into the IT industry. All right, so let's start from the beginning. IT. Let's go left. No, let's go from the right first. So you got IT. It's when people think about it, you're talking about code, writing code and stuff, and that's one part of it. And we'll talk about that part first because that's the part that everyone is closely um, associate IT with. So development. You got a few different types of development. You got the front end development. So this is web development where you create like these UIs that you can see here, like your a website. So it is so what you need, the language that you need to learn is JavaScript. So that's the language of the web. Initially a few decades ago it's the language of the front end, but as we go through you find that it's also the language of the back end now. But JavaScript, if you're going to be a front end developer, you got to know JavaScript. Now I'll quickly run through all the languages first, then we'll get into the nitty gritty of each language. So all right, and then you got HTML which stands for hypertext markup language. Now this one here is what you see when you look at the actual underlying elements of a web page. So all this text here, that's HTML along with some CSS, and that's the third thing on the list there. So HTML is a structuring. So that's how you structure your page. CSS is cascading um, style sheet, which is how you make the page look like what it does, like how you have certain elements lying on top of another element. So that's what CSS stands for. So if you're gonna be doing front end development, you gotta know at least these three. Now, JavaScript, there are frameworks within JavaScript. So, companies, individuals, groups of developers come together and then they develop these ways to make developing websites much quicker. So, React.js is a very popular one, and that's maintained and created by Facebook. AngularJS is by Google, again another popular one, but not as popular as React.js. Vue.js is another popular one. So these three are probably the ones that if you're gonna pick any to learn, I say React.js, but any of these three should be fine. There are plenty of job going for these three. Okay, so that's front end development, and like by all means, this is not an exhaustive list. So let's before we go into games development, let's talk about back end development. So the front end is what the clients say, which is the people who uses the website. The back end is what happens, um, like in terms of fetching data. Basically, like Facebook would have a front end is what you use the Facebook website. The back end could be way down in somewhere across the continent in one of Facebook head office, and this is where all the computing happens. So there's a few things you need to know. So we talked about JavaScript. So a few decades ago, JavaScript is mainly front end, but now it is back end, and it makes it's easier to become a full stack developer. Full stack means you both develop the front end and the back end. So here's the JavaScript. So there are frameworks for the backend, such as Node.js. This one here is not really a framework; it's a JS environment. You develop application um, for uh, for the computer for the desktop using Node.js. You can now because of this Node.js development environment. Express.js is a framework that you use to create servers. So then make it easier to serve content from your server. So when I'm talking about server, I'm talking about computer sitting somewhere waiting for requests and then send those files through. All right. So before we talk about this one, because that's different type of language, let's talk about C and C sharp. C and C sharp is very, again, another popular programming language. C is definitely very popular. If you're gonna learn any kind of back end or really start with any language that's gonna give you um, uh, job prospect, is either C, C++, C sharp, right? Any of the C languages or Java. And we'll talk about Java in a second. Okay, so there's some frameworks for C and C sharp. EF Core is Entity Framework Core. So this is developed by Microsoft, and it's an easy way to create database designs. But that's a little bit high level up. You do need to work towards to work on your skills to be able to do something like EF Core. .NET is just Microsoft framework. So these two are Microsoft framework, and you use C sharp for that. All right. So we talk about how you serve content. So sometimes it's served dynamically. So you got static content. Basically, you can write the page, and then when the client go to the website, type in the web browser and ask for that page, you just give the page as is. But you want that's not fun, and you want it to be a little bit more dynamic. Like you on Facebook again, if you want to ask for a name, you put it in the search bar instead of Facebook creating a static page for every single person. They do it dynamically. What they do is they store data, and as that data get passed to the front end, your web browser renders that data in a form that you see as the web page. So to be able to store data, retrieve data, read, delete data, you need the database query language, and there are popular two main, well, there's two ways to query data by SQL, which is structured query language, and NoSQL, which stands for not only SQL. And you do have to learn SQL to understand why NoSQL is is the up and coming thing. So there's two, SQL is the language, but then there's different uh, flavor to that language, one different flavors to that language, and it's you got SQL Server. SQL Server is created by Microsoft, and you got MySQL, that's free one, and you can download it, muck around with it on your own. You can use it to serve. So if you're going to host any website or create any big website, you find that using MySQL, the license for it is definitely much cheaper because it's really free, but you're paying for the usage on your host. Well, SQL Server is maintained by Microsoft, and as a business, they want some of that profit. Now, NoSQL, so I can't really go much into NoSQL without going to SQL, and that's not the reason for this video. But just know that these are up and coming. Well, they are really already here, and they're very popular amongst our startup. And one of the main advantage is that it's easier to get started in terms of like get your database up and running, because there's little design you have to do. But really, with EF Core, what I'm talking about here, it's it's kind of a mix between SQL and NoSQL, even though really it's built for SQL database frameworks like these ones. So green is language frameworks and libraries. Okay, so that's back end and front end. Let's talk about desktop application development. It's basically creating like any desktop application that you want, Photoshop, such like that. Um, so you can use C and C Sharp to create desktop application. Java, I already mentioned this. That's a very, very popular one. The reason why it's very popular is the way that Java works. Java is run upon a Java virtual machine, and that Java virtual machine has to be installed on every computer. So it creates a layer of abstraction. So then a Java application can be run on any machine because the machine that needs to run the Java application needs to have Java um, virtual machine on it. So that's why it's become very, very popular. Okay, and next thing is mobile development, and this thing is huge. And for people who believe that create believe that they can create the next big app and make themselves a pretty buck, um, this is where a lot of them uh, went, and a lot more people want to be within this space. So you really broken you can break it up to Android and iOS. That's App Store and your Google Play. So Android uses Java and Kotlin. Now so you can see that if you learn Java, you can do both desktop application and Android development. C Sharp, you can do front end, back end. Really, you can also use Java for the back end. Now, Java is yeah, very popular, and that's used to be the main language in Android, but since there's a nice price tag on Java, people are moving towards Kotlin, and that's the reason why Google developed Kotlin to counteract that. And I believe, they saw it coming, and then they're trying to push Kotlin as the main language of Android development. Swift, I don't know much about Swift, but iOS is very different to Android development. So if you're going to do some iOS, then you do Swift. You learn Swift. All right, if anyone's into games development, there's a lot of game engine out there. There's Blender, there's a game engine, Unity, Unreal Engine. There's a lot. But the one that I know is Unity, and it uses C sharp, and again, you can see why C sharp is why it's popular. It's being used across the board of this board anyway. Unity is really cool. It's integrate well with a lot of modeling programs like Blender, 3D Max, and you actually, if you do any 3D modeling or know anyone who does 3D modeling or interested in it, they probably say Blender is an up and coming thing because it becomes so powerful and it integrates so well with Unity. A lot of tutorials that's on games development um, is between Unity and Blender. So that's the mix between Unity and Blender. All right, so now you move on to the other side of it. This one is a little less coding. So the right side here is a lot more about code. On the left side here, you got IT. Um, Remember, when you're developing a software program, an app, you're developing for someone, right? And it has to be um, user friendly. That's why you can go the other route of IT, and this is a totally legitimate route of IT. You don't need to be the guy who types the fastest and write the best lines of code, because with best line, even if you have crazy, beautiful code, but nobody uses your product, it's pointless to have crazy beautiful code, right? So product design, where you got UX and graphics and UI design, is within that pathway. UX is different to UI. UX is about experience, user experience. UI is about looking good. So one way to say UX is about how you can make the design much more user friendly, while UI design is just you creating an interface, a user interface. It could be a shit or could be a good interface depending on your design skill. But UX is aiming solely for good user experience. That's why it's called UX. Um, so it's a lot more to UX than this. You got to do research surveys. It's a very very big area. Um, very enjoyable though. Once you kind of get into the hang of it. So this side here is for the more artistic people, except for down here that's a little bit more technical. And we'll talk about that in a second. So here you have to learn Adobe XD or Figma, and there's so many other programs. The program the web app I'm using to create this chart is called diagram.net or draw.io, but there's so many other like Miro. I don't know more on top of my head, but there's definitely so many more. So graphics design, UI, you do need to use XD if you're doing UI. But if you're mainly doing graphics, like creating icon, you need to know about vector-based art, uh, vector-based design, and you need to know either Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape. So that's the paid one, and that's the free one. And Inkscape is pretty powerful too. So don't um, neglected just because it's not paid and not a lot of professional users. You can get a lot of professional result out of Inkscape. Adobe Photoshop, everyone knows Photoshop, so not much about talk much about it. But you do need Photoshop for to create, touch up images, create images for the web content, and then you gotta understand web the way the web work because you can't load like you can't have your web page full of 4K photos because then the web page will load very slowly and it takes away that user experience. Okay, just imagine trying to wait to load up some thumbnail of, let's say, dog pictures that's only that size, but someone somewhere decided to put a 4K picture, just shrink a 4K picture down. Even though it looks small, there's still 4K worth of data that has to be downloaded, and that's not going to be very user friendly. All right, so that's the artistic side. So we're getting back into the technical side on this bottom part, where IT you can either become a system administrator, and that's a very important job. That's they figured out how to make sure that data flow within an organization or between organizations effectively, maintain hardware, maintain software, and maintain network. And if you're going to do something like, if you want to do something like that, you probably definitely will need to learn Windows and a little bit of Linux. And Linux is uh, it's a topic beyond what I really know, but I know that's because if you go to one of those cloud computing uh, cloud hosts like Amazon Web Servers, Google Cloud, and stuff like that, they have Linux server because Linux is so lightweight, it's just easy and it's so flexible. You can change it to fit your configuration needs. So Linux is something that you should not overlook. But Windows is what most people are used to, and you do need to know like credential management, group policy, and a few other things, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. All right, and the last part of this chart is machine learning. Huge, growing, because of the amount of data that we have access to and the companies are storing. Um, Now, machine learning, that's a that's an interesting pathway. It's very interesting. I've done a little bit of it. You can do the main language for machine learning is Python. Python is a very easy language to learn to get started with. It's definitely much easier than Java. I originally learned Python, then jump over to Java, and I thought, what a difference in the learning curve. Um, but now that I do Java, JavaScript, Python, I'm not as familiar and confident in it anymore. But I've done Python to do machine learning, and the frameworks for machine learning is TensorFlow, sklearn, MXNet. So that's some of the ones that I know. TensorFlow is definitely the most well-known one, just because Google advertised hell out of it, and it's fine. It's powerful. It's really good to know. It's really, and there's plenty of tutorials on it. MATLAB is just another is a language that's specifically used for machine learning. So if you learn MATLAB, it's mainly for this or mathematics stuff. But Python, you can create you can create websites, desktop applications, Blender. You can use that to code in Blender. Yeah. So yeah, Python is also a very good one to learn, good one to get started with. But if you're going to do website development, I say JavaScript. Yes, machine learning. Let's quickly finish off the whole conversation with machine learning. Machine learning, you do need to know mathematics. You, you, I, you, you don't need to know mathematics to get started, but if you want to pursue it as a career, you definitely need to know mathematics. And I'm talking about year, minimum is year 12 specialist maths, or methods if but you got a lot more to catch up on, and you want to focus on matrices, you want to focus on probability, what is it, so so many more, but those one would be matrix probability, differentiation, antiderivative, derivatives, all of that. So you do need to get into your maths classroom and really pay attention if you want to do machine learning statistic, because this is statistical probability. It's all about what's the chance of something happening. So that's pretty much it for this diagram. Again, it's not meant to be an exhaustive diagram on everything you can do in IT, because it's totally impossible. Anyways, I hope whoever's listening to this find it useful. And yes, if you have any questions, you can try and reach out to me. I'm not sure how, because I'm not maybe through people that refer this video to you, and just going back on that chain of referral. All right, guys and girls, good luck. I hope you guys found that useful, and all the best with your future endeavor.